Hello and welcome to the Anita Post Show and the Bitcoin for Fairness series. In this show, we talk about the role Bitcoin plays in enabling economic empowerment for individuals and communities by providing fair and open access to a global financial network. My guest is Craig Raw, founder and developer of Sparrow, a Bitcoin desktop wallet with a focus on multi-signature for distributed self-custody and privacy. In 2020, he started Sparrow out of the desire to build something with and for Bitcoin, which can fill the gaps he saw within the existing wallets. I started to use Sparrow recently and asked specific questions related to coinjoining and for his recommendations for human rights activists on how to use Bitcoin with a maximum of privacy. As always, you can watch this interview on YouTube or listen to it in your favorite podcast player. If you want to try something new, use a Lightning-enabled podcast app like the Breeze app, Sphinx Chat app or the Fountain app. Thanks for supporting Bitcoin for Fairness go out to the Human Rights Foundation, OKCoin and Leden.io. And now enjoy the interview.
Learn Bitcoin will teach you the why and how to use Bitcoin. Anita's work makes Bitcoin approachable, understandable, and compelling to those who are new to Bitcoin. Andreas M. Antonopoulos, author Mastering Bitcoin and the Internet of Money. Order your copy now at learnbitcoin.link. That's learnbitcoin.link. Craig Raw, welcome to the Anita Post Show. Thanks for doing this with me. Please introduce yourself to our listeners.
Sure. Thank you. Great to be here. I'm Craig Raw. I'm the developer of Sparrow Wallet.
Okay. But you have had a life before. So how did you get into Bitcoin and when?
So it's hard for me to remember the exact moment. In my previous life that you mentioned, I considered it part of my job to just understand what was going on in the technology space. And so I would spend a lot of time reading various sources, various news sources that talked about it, and obviously came across Bitcoin while I was doing that. And that was around 2011. But I only really, started to look more deeply in 2012. So that's kind of the era in which I came in, and I think I bought my first Bitcoin in 2013. So, that was kind of when I came in, and then, ever since that point, just researched it and read as much as I could. And I might say the information back there was really much poorer than it is today. So I just was really trying to find any information that I could, looking in what is now obviously not the best places to me now. But at the time I was on Reddit all the time and then just trying to understand it, and it really took me many years to kind of develop a conviction in it, and a sense of why this thing won't fail. And that was really the question that I needed to fully answer before I was able to jump in with both feet.
So that was in 2012 then or something when you realized it can't fail?
No, not at all. No, I would say it probably took me 3 to 4 years to answer every question in my head to a satisfactory sense that I no longer worried about it. It was no longer a sense of, well, what about that? Is there a niggling doubt there? I like to go all the way down the rabbit hole, and it did take many years to do that, particularly with, as I said, the poor information that we had at that time.
Yeah, I fully agree and understand that. It's the same for me. I mean, I did like 150 podcast interviews, and still I have questions which are open for me. Not that I think it will fail or something. But what made you think that it won't fail anymore?
Well, there's no simple answer to that. I mean, you really have to go and answer every single question that comes into your head and that everyone will pose. The answer to that would take us days to get through. So I'm afraid I can't give you a simple answer to that. But you just have to, every question that is, if you are thinking about it and you're wondering about it, you have to yourself go in and answer all of those questions. There's no substitute for doing that work yourself, I think, because in order to develop the kind of certainty that I have, there's just no shortcuts to it. You have to have the right answers and have them fully explored in your own mind.
That's right. What's the most important property of Bitcoin, do you think? I mean, it's uncensorable. It has a maximum limit of 21 million. It has a consensus, so everybody involved has to agree on the future of the development and things like that.
Sure. I think that, ultimately the scarcity is the most important, but you can't really divide that scarcity away from the other properties. It becomes worth much less if you have censorability, because what's the point of having money but then you can't spend it because someone doesn't like what you're doing with your life. That's I think it's very important that you have the other properties built into it. Ultimately, I see Bitcoin fundamentally as a savings technology. That's primarily what it enables, and that's something that is missing from the world today. You cannot really save in the world today. You can invest your money, which increasingly has meant taking risky bets on companies that ultimately not a great deal about. I think the only company that you can really know a lot about is one that you are deeply involved in. But to invest in a company from the outside, very little about. So ultimately, that kind of investment, particularly in today's markets, is increasingly just a gamble. And asking people to gamble with their life savings just to have those retain their purchasing power, I think is a very poor place that the world is. So what Bitcoin provides to the world is a way to save. And that is, I think, a hugely fundamental part in which our civilization is built, and allows people to lower their time preference, to consider planning for the future. And it just changes so many things about the society in which we live that it really, the effects are felt far beyond what people would expect. Just a financial sense of well-being. I think it goes into every part of your life. So for me, that's really the most important thing that it brings. Mm-hmm.
But there are a lot of people who still are like on the outside and saying, no, Bitcoin, we don't need that. And the people who would need it the most, like we say, they also can't deal with the volatility because they have no money to save. And if they try to save a little bit, now we're just seeing another dip in Bitcoin. And I see again all those talks about Bitcoin is crashing and whatever. Yeah. So what would you say to someone who tells you, but the really poor people can't afford to save in Bitcoin because they will lose the money? Because if it goes down, everything is gone.
Yeah, I think that, ultimately when you are saving, you have to have a long time frame. You can't have a short time frame on it. And yes, it is scary to see Bitcoin go down, particularly if it is the savings that you have. And it's difficult to have the kind of trust to know that it will go back up again, right? That's a difficult thing. I mean, we can never precisely know what the future has in store. So, that kind of trust is only built over time. Do OG Bitcoiners worry when the price goes down? No, because they've been through that. But it is scary for someone coming into it. And that's just a reality. We are watching the monetization of a good for the first time in thousands of years. We've never seen this before. And it's going to be a bumpy road. It's not going to be a straight line. That is, unfortunately, the effect of humans on Bitcoin. Humans get scared, humans sell, and then they buy again. And that is the effect of human nature that you are seeing. It's not actually a function intrinsic to Bitcoin itself, which is extremely predictable, but we are using it, and it is a tool for us. So we have to accept that with that kind of human intervention, we're going to see the kind of ups and downs that come with human emotion.
Yeah. You're the lead developer, founder, or I guess it's a one-man show, Sparrow Wallet?
Yes, it's all of the above.
All of the above. And why did you start the Sparrow Wallet, to develop the Sparrow Wallet?
Really, I just wanted to be part of Bitcoin's journey. I see it as such a fundamental invention that I think it is it is so important to mankind that it's really going to be seen in the same way as the rise of the internet and that kind of thing. It's difficult to compare the two. One is dependent on the other and so forth. But, for me to be part of that journey, even in some small way, I just couldn't see a better way to spend my time. It was just clear that was what was calling to me on a very deep level after, as I said, all these years of researching it and understanding it. I just wanted to build something in it. That's the kind of person I am. I like to create. I am a developer. And for me, there was a very big gap in the Bitcoin tooling, particularly around multisig at the time. I was trying to create a multisig wallet. I was using the Electrum wallet. And although I could do it, it required, the kind of development know-how that very few people have. And it was just difficult and left me feeling quite uncertain. It was sort of building on an unstable stack of things. And I just felt, no, this can be done better. And that's kind of how it all began, just really wanting to build. And it sort of tied in very well with the start of the COVID pandemic. Some good things did come of it. And for me, it was really, I can't leave my home. We had pretty severe lockdown down here. And it just gave me the kind of focus to be able to spend a lot of time into it, really dig into it, and take my time to build it exactly as I wanted it to be built, not take any shortcuts, just to really get it right. And that's kind of been the whole sort of ethos. I just kind of wanted to build it the way that I would want it to be, regardless of how long it takes or what additional hills there are that need to be climbed.
Mm-hmm. The multisig is the one thing. What is the other thing that you have a focus on?
Privacy. That for me is very clearly been something which has been largely, I think not received enough focus on the base layer. And I think, the reality of it is we don't have privacy in Bitcoin baked in by default. So it's up to us application developers, application level developers, to build it in and build in the tools that enable people to be more private, because the sort of layer one, the protocol layer, doesn't have it built in. So that for me has been a very big focus, is building in various tools, sort of reimagining them on the desktop that allow people to transact in a more private way.
Mm-hmm. Why on the desktop?
The desktop is, for me, I want to caveat this at the start by saying I completely understand and accept that most people will interact with the internet and with Bitcoin with a mobile phone. But for me, for what I said earlier, I built Sparrow primarily for my own needs first. And for me, I'm going to interact with Bitcoin using the most powerful device that I have, right? Because these are my life savings, right? It's very important to me that I'm not doing it on a restricted device. And a phone is a restricted device. It's got a small screen. It's got a reduced, processing power. So in other words, it can't, various things like it can't encrypt files as well, because it takes much longer to do various things when you don't have as much processing power. So there's just a number of different compromises that you need to make all the way along in order to run a Bitcoin app on your phone. And for me, it was about not trying to make those compromises and just really taking the best possible environment and building the best possible application for it.
Mm-hmm. Are you using Linux or Mac or PC for your work?
All of the above.
All of them.
Yeah, I obviously had to test on all of those.
Mm-hmm.
So yes, I use all of those.
Mm-hmm. So basically, I think, tell me if that's true, but I believe it's true, that PCs, for instance, are not so secure than your mobile phone, for instance.
I think that very much depends on a whole lot of different factors. It's not as simple a statement as that, right? You can absolutely have a very secure desktop, and you can absolutely have a very secure mobile phone. For example, Android is really not very secure at all. And if you speak to anybody who knows a lot about phones, they will tell you Android is a disaster when it comes to being private on a phone. Okay. But you can install Calyx, which is much more private.
You can install what?
Calyx, which is a mobile phone operating system based on Android, but with a lot of the Google stuff taken out and a lot of security. And then you could even go further and install something like Graphene, which is even more secure. So, it really depends on what you're doing. On the desktop, you can install Tails, you can install, operating systems that really, as long as you practice good device hygiene, keep you pretty safe.
Yes, but to be honest, it's the same with very secure and multi-sig Bitcoin wallets with those tools. If you're a Bitcoin user who's really just a user and not interested in it as much as I am, then you just go for the easy, convenient way, like you leave your coins on an exchange. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's up to us devs to make it easier, right? That's part of the goal. I think that there are a lot of steps towards getting towards a more safe point though. And I think that, one shouldn't do is say, well, it's just too hard, I'm not even going to start. There are steps that you can take. For instance, using a Mac is almost certainly more secure than using Windows, right? Now, you are having to trust Apple, but at least you are not dealing with a operating system which is fundamentally insecure from the ground up. Mac OS X is built on Unix, and that is from a fundamental level, a more secure way to begin. So even though you may be exposed to Apple, at least you're not exposed to the greater world. And I think that, Apple devices are relatively easy to use, and they run all the apps that you would want and so forth. So you don't have to go all the way to Calyx or Graphene on step one. You can simply start by moving towards something which is somewhat more secure. And I think that that's the most important message to tell people, is just start taking small steps. Doesn't have to be the whole thing in one go.
But then you again have this centralized nature of Apple and the power it has.
Of course.
So it's everything a trade-off, right?
It is, but again, you see exploits on Windows much more often than you see on OS X. That's just the truth of the matter, So is it better? I believe so. Is it the best? No, but it's certainly better.
Can you please give us a hint or tips how to set up Sparrow for coin joining the best way? Is there anything that I can do that the coins are joined more faster?
Sure. So I think one thing to understand is that when you are performing the coin joining, right, you don't want all your coin joining to happen at once. Imagine you did your first premix and then went and did the first mix, and then you got 5 immediately after that. That would be fairly obvious to see on chain, right? Everyone would see, okay, well, those coins went there, and then there, and there, and there. And they were all in that time when your laptop was on in the space of a half hour, right? Now, that would make it very obvious to see that you could link those transactions up. And that's exactly what we don't want, right? We're trying to get away from linking one CoinJoin transaction to the next. So having random intervals of time that are longer than the next block is very important. So that's the reason that it takes time. It's actually a requirement. Now, there are other CoinJoin services that don't do this, and there are plenty of evidence in the media of how those CoinJoins have been unraveled because of issues like, it's not the only issue, certainly, but the sort of timing analysis is an issue, and it does contribute to that. And privacy is a serious matter, so we can't take these shortcuts. Yes, it's certainly more inconvenient to leave your computer on. But if you want to be private, these are the tools that you have. Once you accept that Bitcoin is not private by default and that you have to do these things on top, you realize that a certain amount of inconvenience is required because there are no shortcuts. You're basically trying to create a series of transactions that break the history, which is otherwise deterministically linked. So that's really the reason that it takes time, is that you need to have these indeterminate and random amounts of time between one Coinjoin transaction and the other. In terms of making it easier, there are other tools that you can use. So there's, for example, the Whirlpool CLI tool, which is by Samurai Wallet, that you can, if you have a node, particularly the Ronin Dojo node, you can run that on the node itself. So you can set up your Coinjoin with, so long as you use the same seed words, you can set up your Coinjoin on Sparrow. So you've got the nice UI, and then you can turn Sparrow off, and you can run the CLI tool on your node, which is just sitting online somewhere while you travel. So, you know, there are ways that you can do to make it easier if you're battling to keep your laptop online and connected for long periods.
That's interesting, because I do have a node, but it's in Austria with a friend. So yeah, okay. Can you maybe break down for us the tools that I would say a not so technical person, or even less technical than I am, can use to be very secure and very private in that way? I'm asking because I'm always interested in Bitcoin as a tool also for human rights activists, you know,
sure,
who should not be found by government authorities or police because they have another political opinion or something like that. What would be like if we say it's a person who is using a mobile phone and wants to receive and send Bitcoin, but not to be found? What are the wallets and also the devices? I guess now you would recommend an iPhone, but what would you recommend here?
Well, actually, I wouldn't in that case. I think if you're using a mobile phone, the Samurai Wallet app is by far the most private way to transact. So, you know, a lot of the technologies that we just mentioned, for example, the Coinjoin, they implemented that first. That's kind of their design. And I think it's a very good design. I think the sort of incentives work very, very well. And as we know from Bitcoin itself, that's an important thing to have in any model, right? So you have this idea that people come into a Coinjoin and then they stay because they get the free sort of remixes. And because they stay, the set of people the sort of crowd that you hide in is much bigger. Mm-hmm. So that's what I mean when I say the incentives work well and they help everyone stay more, you know, sort of private. There are also a number of other tools which both Sparrow Wallet and Samurai Wallet have. So there's this technology called BIP47, which you may have heard of, and that basically allows you to post what we call a payment code, or in fact a paynim, which is just a shortened version of it. And then you can then receive donations anonymously to that with any wallet that supports it, right? So that basically, if you just post your Bitcoin address, then anyone can see on a blockchain explorer, I can see exactly how many funds went there, and they can block any, you know, they can go to all of the exchanges like the Canadian government did and say, you may not accept any funds from this particular address. But with BIP47, you can't see the address. What it allows you to do as a Bitcoin user is to construct a unique address which only you and the person you're paying know. Mm-hmm. And then that allows you to be very private because there's no starting point to be able to see, well, you know, where did this, where is this money flowing? Okay, and that would then, I guess, also work if you obtained your coins on an exchange. Because, yes, yeah? Absolutely. Okay. Yes, so if you obtained your coins on an exchange and wanted to pay someone else, they could certainly see that flow of funds, but they'd be completely unaware where you were sending it to. They'd just see this random address, and they have no way to link it to the person that you're paying. Mm-hmm. So which device would you use for that, and which wallets? It's I think Samurai can do that. Yes. And Sparrow Wallet can do too? Yes. So those are the only two wallets as of today, but I have reason to believe that there will be more soon. Yeah, I think so too. At least I hope so too. Okay, is there anything else human rights activists, let's say in Zimbabwe, has to think of? You know, without wanting to get too detailed, there are a number of privacy-related tools which help you when you spend. So what some Samurai wallets have called Stonewall, and what you can use in Sparrow simply by clicking the optimize button on the send page, is in effect a two-person coin join, which is either a fake two-person coin join, or you can actually collaborate with somebody and then create effectively a two-person coin join with you. So that you both contribute funds and you get two equal outputs, one of which is the payment, the other one just goes straight back to the person who you're interacting with. And that really does what we call increase the entropy of a transaction. In other words, make it so much more difficult to tell what's going on. You know, you can't just follow the flow of funds through. Now you've got a much lower probability. In effect, it's actually cut in half, because now you say, well, it could have been this one or this one. And now that makes blockchain analysis much, much harder to do.
Mm-hmm. Please explain the anonymity set. What I know is with one coin join, I have an anonymity set of 5, I was told. But I don't know what that actually means.
So that's not actually true. So, you know, one thing that people don't really think about when they coin join is that it's not just you doing the coin joining, right? So let's say that you did your coin join and you were one of these 5 outputs, right? Was your coin. And then you went offline for a year. It doesn't mean that the other 4 didn't also go offline, right? They may have stayed online. And if they continue to mix, then nobody can say which is yours, right? So your anonymity is not just determined by the number of mixes that you get, but by the number of mixes that all your peers get as well. And that's a point which is not well understood. So just you alone, you say you've only got one mix, but all of your peers probably have many, and you might be one of their outputs to the outside world. So your anonymity set is almost certainly much higher than 5 at this point. It's probably hundreds, if not thousands.
Oh, wow.
Just because you did it a while ago.
Uh-huh. And you just said, I said 5, you said 100 or 1,000. How high can that go? What's the scale? What is this?
It can go, you know, as large as the number of people who coin join. You know, it can continue to build out until it gets to a point where it doesn't really matter, because we're talking about such tiny fractions of a percent that nobody can ever understand. You know, but it's also important to understand, just with that first link, all of the deterministic links are broken. So you can't say, we know for sure that these funds flowing into the transaction are the same owner as these funds on the outside. You get that with the very first mix.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Coming back to the mixing, the post-mixing. Now, does it make a difference if I have like 5 UTXOs in there or 100?
It doesn't really make any difference in terms of the privacy that you get, but certainly, you know, it affects the fees. So, you know, you then pay less for the amount, because the way that Whirlpool works is you pay a set percentage on the pool size, not on the amount that you mix. Mm-hmm. So, for example, the smallest pool, you pay a fee of 5,000 sats. That's it, right? And you can mix as much as you want for that. So it's really more about trying to optimize your fees than it is around trying to, you know, do anything else.
Okay. One question more about that. So I have all these UTXOs, and then I see a blue bar, thank you, where it says registered 1 of 309 or 310 Correct. Or whatever outputs. And then it jumps to another UTXO. What is it doing there? And when does it stop? I mean, when is it coin joined again?
What you need to see is that bar then keep going, right? The reason that it jumps is that it refreshes the UTXO that is registered every hour. And it just does that in order just to make sure that everything is still live. Remember, it's trying to effectively create this interactive transaction with you and 4 others. Mm-hmm. And in order to do that, people might be going offline. You're not sure if, you know, we're trying to do this over this, what is actually an unstable medium of the internet, right? Mm-hmm. So it's just doing that kind of selecting another UTXO, and they're all effectively to the world much the same. It's just ensuring a certain amount of liveness check, if you will. But now in terms of getting another mix, you have to see that bar then continue on to the end, right? And you haven't seen that yet because you haven't been online enough, right? Mm-hmm. But it does happen. And in fact, you can trigger it if you use sort of, testnet mixing, you can actually go in there and you can actually see it to a more, precise degree. Otherwise, you just have to kind of be online, and it will happen with time.
Mm-hmm. So you have a lot of focus on self-custody and privacy. A lot of people tell me, I have nothing to hide. Why would I need all of that? What are your thoughts about that? And where does this interest in the focus on privacy come from from your personal experience or life or interest? Where does it come from?
So my answer to that, when people say it, I say, well, great, can you provide me, if you don't mind, since you don't have anything to hide, can you give me your email password? And I will then take that and I will put up the contents of your email for everyone on the internet to see. And would you mind? And most people don't think that that's such a great idea. So I think everybody has a degree to which they want to be private. And it's not really about having something to hide. It's more about the sense that as human beings, we have a desire to be private, to have certain parts of our life to be private. And that's just a normal thing to want. In fact, I believe it is a basic human right.
I think so too, yeah.
And once you get to that point, then I think it's reasonable to extend that and say, well, my finances, my money should be private as well, to the extent that I would like it to be. It's not about not paying tax. It's not about trying to break the law. It's just about trying to say, I desire a certain amount of privacy with the finances. I don't want everybody to know everything that I spend money on, how much I spend it on. And I think that that's also normal and everyone wants it. So it's really about just giving us, I think, what human beings want.
Mm-hmm. I agree, yeah. And I'm very glad to see that more and more developers focus on that, and there are more tools being built at the moment in that direction. Yeah. Yeah,
it's still small and slow in my view, but I hope you're right.
Yeah, I hope so too, because otherwise the forces that don't want Bitcoin to succeed have a much greater impact. I mean, I think there are a lot of people who don't want Bitcoin to be an alternative for their people. I mean, just look at Zimbabwe. I mean, I'm always talking with the people there when I interview them, and the first thing is, what shall we not talk about? And it's always, no, please don't talk about the government. And I can imagine that they want to crack down once on people who are using Bitcoin. I've heard you talking in another interview, I think it was on Stefan Rivera's podcast. You said you don't think that there will be a ban on Bitcoin anymore. It might be, I guess, in some countries, but in general, you don't think. How does that come? Why don't you think that?
Look, obviously, I think it can happen in any country, but I don't think it's going to happen on a global level. I think that we're past that point now. Hard to say precisely why, but I think for me the more important factor now is, as we were just saying, are we going to get the privacy in Bitcoin that we want, or in effect we're just going to have this transparent public ledger where everyone's names are attached to everything. And that's a scary place. And I think we could end up there. So for me, the fight is very much on as to whether we're going to win that or not. You mentioned the corporate interests. The corporate interests have no interest really in trying to make people more private. That's a human need, and I think very much an individual need. And that for me is something that I do worry about. I worry that Lightning is headed towards a custodial main implementation. Most of the way people interact with it will be on a custodial level. I am concerned about that. I don't think it's necessarily a foregone conclusion that it will happen, but it does seem to be the way that it may go. And I do worry about that. And I worry about the privacy on that layer as well. I worry that not enough is being done there. So, and that's not to take away from the people who are working on it, but there are very difficult things to solve there. And I fear that unless they are solved reasonably soon, we're going to have such large corporate interests that just simply make any kind of changes too hard to make. That is my concern on that layer.
Okay, what do you think about other scaling solutions like sidechains, or is there anything you think that will bring the scalability to Bitcoin that we need for it to be a tool, like a payment, a money that we can spend worldwide?
Absolutely. I think that those things will come. I'm not sure precisely whether it will be any one particular thing or just a mix of them, but I believe very much that human ingenuity will solve these issues. For me, the question that remains is, as I said, are we going to solve them in a way that allows users to be private, or are we going to go towards this, panopticon of everyone's information being, of really less privacy than what we've had in the past? And I think that that's very much an open question today.
Mm-hmm. I think we're going to see a world where we have a white Bitcoin and a black Bitcoin, in a way, like white and dark. Is that something you see too? Like all the people who are coin joining their coins now, those coins, you will never be able to sell them on an exchange anymore. And then you have the corporate Bitcoin, which is what you say, completely transparent and driven by corporate and governmental interest. Is this a view that you share? Or?
No, I don't believe that such a binary view makes a lot of sense to me. I think that to an extent we will always have a little bit of grayness, but ultimately, if you look at what a coin join is, it's really just a transaction with multiple participants, number one, and equal outputs, number two. And if you think about that, you realize that that's not really a strong basis for which to block anything. It's kind of are you saying that you can't have transactions which have multiple participants, or are you saying that you can't have transactions which have more than one output having the same value? If you really think about that, that seems a very arbitrary reasons to block anything. And I think ultimately, that's just one way of doing things. There are going to be many others, like coin swaps and all kinds of things that are steganographic, in the sense that you can't see on chain that anyone's actually done them. So this idea that we're going to have this that's going to be able to be easy to tell, oh, this is a black Bitcoin, oh, this is a white Bitcoin, I don't think that makes a lot of sense to me. There's just too many ways around it, and technologies that we still are going to see that, in effect, I don't think that version of the reality is going to come to pass.
Mm-hmm. That's interesting that you say that, because now at the moment it's a fact that exchanges tell you no, we don't.
Very few do. I think that that is largely, in fact, there's people maintain lists of them, and they really are isolated incidents. And it's up to us Bitcoiners to call those incidents out and to punish the companies that do it, because they are in effect saying to us, you can't be private.
Yeah.
And that's a very, very bad thing to be saying. That's actually an evil thing to be saying. So if we do not punish them by calling them out, by restricting business to them, by doing whatever we can to make it clear to them that those corporate decisions they're making are not in their best interests, then we are doing ourselves a disservice.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. But most of the people are using Facebook still, and I'm also using Google, which said 15 years ago, don't be evil.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. But I mean, it's also true that most people in the world are not using Bitcoin yet, right?
That's right.
The time is now, with the Bitcoin as we have now, to set the kind of the sort of Overton window, if you will, on what is acceptable and what is not. And from where I stand, and I might just be in a little bubble of my own here, but I think Coinjoin is becoming a far more accepted means to just achieve what, as I said, is a basic human right. I don't see it as doing anything wrong, and I think increasingly any exchange or service that attempts to block a coin join is going to get punished heavily by users who really are just, saying this is normal. I'm just, participating with others to create a transaction with equal outputs. That's all I'm doing. There's nothing strange about this.
You said you've been into Bitcoin about since 2010, 2012. That's over 10 years now. How have your views on Bitcoin changed? Is there something you can tell us? Like, what did you think is Bitcoin in the beginning? What are you thinking about it now? Has there anything changed? What are the big ideas that might have changed?
It's a difficult question. It's hard to look back so long ago and know what your mental state was. But I think, I certainly had a belief that Bitcoin was much more private at the start. I kind of thought that was solved.
And I thought it doesn't have transaction fees.
So, learning that it's actually not private by default is quite a rude awakening, if you will, to the fact that we might be enabling taking away cash, or at the same time, cash is being taken away, should I say, providing the solution which just has this transparent ledger that anybody can see. That's a worrying thing. So for me, that was, I think, one of the big kind of understandings that I came to, was there's something here that needs to be fixed. And I still hope that it can be fixed better on the protocol layer. There are things that can be done, even without, I believe, making too dramatic a change. It's really about trying to advocate for those things and build them in where I can, that I'm sort of hoping to make a change.
Do you listen to a lot of public opinion and Twitter stuff, what is being said about Bitcoin? Or
I try to stay up to date, yes. I try to, keep up to date and talk to people in the industry and understand what their views are and sort of how things are evolving over time. So yes, it's an ongoing challenge for us all, I think.
And the Bitcoin space in South Africa, how has this developed? I mean, I guess you're one of the first here you started developing on it only 2 years ago, but when was the first meetup? Do you know that? I mean, there are meetups, I think.
Yeah, actually, I can't remember the year that it was in. It was probably at least 5 years ago, but actually Andreas came and he gave a talk, and that was an early Bitcoin meetup that we had. And I think it devolved into altcoins later on. But, certainly we had those sort of early beginnings. In terms of more recently, I think it's starting to come up again now. I think we're starting to see it, but I haven't seen a great deal from, as I say, my own bubble, and perhaps it's been going on and I've just been unaware, but I don't think so. I think that we are starting to see, various efforts now, and, I obviously get contacted by people who are setting up businesses and, trying to help people do self-custody and all of those kind of things. I think that I'm quite hopeful with the way that it's building again now, and it seems to be building on a much better basis of Bitcoin only, as opposed to what we had in the past.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's a lot of crypto in Africa.
Yeah, that's true.
So there's a saying, you can't change Bitcoin, Bitcoin changes you. Mm-hmm. How has Bitcoin changed you, if it has?
I think it's purely, well, not purely, but certainly primarily in the sense of lowering your time preference. You really can't explain to somebody what that feels like, and how lowering your time preference and your sort of ability to plan and see the future changes everything in your life. So I think that's the most important thing, but it's also just given me a sense of purpose around my life, which I'm sure that you have as well, where you just get a sense of this thing that I'm working on has value, has importance in the world. And sure, that's not seen by most people yet, but it's gradually being seen by more and more, gradually. And you can see it as you go. And it's a very heartening thing to see people starting to wake up to it. And you have conversations with people who were initially, a few years ago, very opposed to it. And you can see them coming around gradually, whether they like it or not, because they realize this thing is here to stay, and I have to make some accommodation in my understanding of the world to bring it in. How am I going to fit my world model in with this thing in it now? And what does it mean? And that kind of thing takes a different period of time for different people. But I think that, it's great to see that journey in various ways.
What are your plans for the Sparrow Wallet in the near and the further future? Where do you want to take it? I mean, what is the next development step?
I think that there's no precise thing. I mean, right now I'm, for want of a more exciting development goal, just put together the first, Apple has come out with this new chip, and it's a different architecture. So putting a build together for that, which allows people who are running the new Apple Macs to run a native version of Sparrow. So nothing Bitcoin related, but important, none the sort of less. I want Sparrow to keep up to date with where the Bitcoin technology is going, particularly in terms of self-custody and in terms of privacy. I don't see necessarily my role as trying to craft the next cutting edge thing myself. Is it going to be payment pools or that kind of thing? Those things are complex and require a lot of time, and I think dedicated focus. Whereas my job is to more see what products are successful and how can I adapt the technologies that they use into Sparrow to broaden the reach of those. That's kind of what I think I should be doing. So, from that point of view, I'll certainly continue to build on the angles that I've said. I'll just keep, adding to them and putting things in. Beyond that, I don't like to talk too much about where I'm going and what I'm building, and that's just a personal thing. I like to give myself the freedom to be able to think about it without getting into the corporate mindset of, we need a 12-month roadmap and what are we going to have built by October and those kind of things. And that's just a personal decision of how I want to build this thing. Yeah,
I understand. And what are the sources you're following, like in terms of what's the next technology in that space and things like that? I guess you're connected with other Bitcoiners around the world.
Sure. I try to follow everything that is sort of wallet related. So all of the kind of wallet tech, I'm obviously sitting on the various lists and connected to various people working on the other wallets, and we, share ideas and we talk about what we're interested in and do calls and meet at conferences and things. So, that's kind of how I sort of stay up to date. But I'm always interested in how Bitcoin's going to scale. That remains one of those, perennial questions that people are trying to answer in various ways. And obviously Sparrow needs to consider that because, at some point that, we need to go beyond layer one in order to be able to scale. So how Sparrow is going to do that is still very much an open, question in my mind. And I try to stay up to date with all the different ways in which people are trying to solve that in order to understand which one has the best legs and which one is going to preserve Bitcoin's ethos the best as it grows. Mm-hmm.
Yes, thank you. Anything we missed we should talk about in the last minutes? Anything you want to add?
No, other than just to say, to people, realize that when you use Bitcoin, your privacy is not guaranteed, and you need to use the tools at this time. You need to use the tools that a wallet like Sparrow can offer you in order to achieve the privacy that I think everyone wants. So it's not difficult to use these tools. If you don't have a friend like you, there's documentation on sparrowwallet.com. You can read up about it. It's not difficult to use. It's really just a few clicks. You're not going to put your funds at risk. It's all you retain self-custody of your funds with all of these tools at all times, as we believe as Bitcoiners. But, familiarize yourself with them now, start practicing with them now so that you don't end up needing them when you have to do a larger transaction and now you're trying to do it for the first time. My other advice is use testnet. The next version of Sparrow will actually have a way to start testnet directly from the UI. It'll basically just shut down your current Sparrow and fire up Sparrow in a testnet sense, and you can connect to a public server, you can get some coins, and you can just try everything. And it's really a very underutilized resource that we all have. So that's my other big piece of advice, is just to use it. Spend some time. Don't just sit on your Twitter feed or read your podcast. Actually go and use the tool, practice with the tool.
Yeah.
And you'll feel that you're so much better equipped, and you'll also just understand Bitcoin better, which is what we're all trying to do here.
Exactly. Thank you very much, Craig. It was a pleasure having you, and all the best to you and the Sparrow Wallet.
Great, thank you. It's been great to be here.
That's it. Thanks for joining. If you've enjoyed this interview, please subscribe to my podcast at anita.link/news and recommend it to your friends. A special thanks goes out to the Human Rights Foundation, Laden.io and OKCoin for supporting Bitcoin for Fairness. See you soon at the Anita Post Show.